Okay, so once again, thank you very much. Good evening for joining us for the art of presentation, how to create a portfolio for visual arts artists. My name is Dion Doxy. I am the programs manager here at Bronx Council on the Arts. I have headphones on, dark blue glasses with gold hoops, with a mustard yellow sweater, and I'm sitting in front of a white wall. And I identify as an African American woman. And really quickly, I want to get it. I know most of you know about us at BCA, but in case you don't, we were founded in 1962. Our aim, mission, goal is to strengthen the cultural ecosystem of the Bronx. Our tagline is connector, resource, advocate. We've been in the Bronx for more than 60 years. We have programs such as we have grants that range that give out more from 1,000 to $20,000. We have an array of programs for our Bronx Memoir Project, artist residencies, but I will say we have our Longwood Art Gallery that's located in Hostos Community College. And just a quick plug, shameless plug at that. We have an opening reception for our newest exhibition on March 27th called I Stand My Ground.
That's tomorrow night, right? That's tomorrow night.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's tomorrow night. So you still have time to RSVP on our website. And last but not least, I just want to let you know there will be times during the presentation where I will drop the survey in to let us know how we're doing. So please feel free to fill that out so that we know how we do and how we can better serve you. So now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to our facilitator today. So Jeongi Yo is a native of South Korea, earned her BFA at Cooper Union. She became an arts educator. In 2005, she earned her MFA in New Forms at Pratt Institute. And she has her master's in environmental science from the College of Staten Island. So she will be our facilitator today. Please give her your attention, energy. Please make sure you go on mute for now unless you have a question, and I'm going to hand it off to Jeongi.
Hi. Oops, I'm just getting like a phone call all of a sudden. Hi, I'm Yunji. I am not a Bronxite. I am actually I live in Brooklyn, but I'm happy to join in with you guys and to share some of my knowledge. So I am a practicing artist. My day job is a public school art teacher. I'm on sabbatical this year though. So it's been kind of a blessing. And I'm able to do this with you guys. So I am going to share my screen with you, and you will have access to the slideshow, the presentation, which has some links that you can click into that Dion will share with you. And let's start. So while I am presenting, if there is something that you want to just, pop in and ask a question, you're more than welcome to do that. And then if at some point I'm like, oh, we should move on, I'll let you know, and then you can jot it down in the chat and we can discuss it in the Q&A section. So, I'm going to share my screen with you. Let me know if this is working. Everyone good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, great. Okay, so I tried to be as comprehensive. Sorry, that's the sound of like my cat feeder going off. I tried to be as comprehensive as I could without overwhelming you with too much information. So, if you do have questions. Okay, so what is a visual arts portfolio? I also do want to say that I know that many of you guys are in different parts, different timelines of your arts career. So, if you're like, oh, I already know this, please excuse me. And, hopefully this presentation does help you. I actually learned a lot of things for myself while I was putting it together. I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I do that? Or why didn't I know about that? So hopefully that's the same for you also. What is a visual arts portfolio? by definition, it is a curated collection showcasing your best work as an artist. So like we are constantly making things in our studios or in our creative spaces, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to go into your portfolio. But we do want to be making. And the purpose of a curated collection is that it serves as a visual resume of our work so that our target audiences, and we're looking at the bottom here, we are thinking about the people who will be looking at it, curators, galleries, maybe different school programs, residencies, other students, art enthusiasts, etc. will be looking at it, and they're like, oh, I think this is a great artist fit for our space or our program. And the format that it often takes is a website. Sometimes it's social media and a website. I do both. I am not printing a catalog, but whatever works for you. I think, having said that, I think nowadays everyone is looking for a website. So if you don't have one yet, it's, it would be helpful to start thinking about it. In terms of presentation, you do want to think about which pieces and also in what order you're going to be showing your work. Essential elements of it. And I broke it down into 3 parts, and I'm going to go into each part a little bit more specifically. So your portfolio is showing your range or concentration of work. It could be you're showing your specialty, like I am a painter and I only use oil paints and I'm really good with this. Or it could be like, oh, I have versatility and I have a huge range of different styles and mediums, and that is all okay. Presentation wise, you want to think about how it comes off again to your target audience. And then there is the third part, which is actually writing. Writing is so important. And I think a lot of times we're just like making art in our studio and we're hoping that someone's going to come and look at it. But writing is an essential part. And we're going to talk about why it is in a little bit. In this bottom right box, I put some resources. I apologize, they're not links, but you could just copy and paste them into a Google search and they will bring you to other resources that will, help you understand how to build a visual arts portfolio. Any questions? Everybody okay? All right. So moving on. How do I create a portfolio? So you do this by creating work. You get into the studio and you create work. In creating your work and specifically thinking about that portfolio that represents you, it should be a cohesive body of work. And the way that I like to explain this to my students is that you think of yourself almost as like this creator of a universe, right? We talk about universe creating or universe building. And what that means is that, maybe you're a person that creates characters, or maybe you're a person that uses colors in a certain way, or you build things with certain materials. Whatever it is, each piece belongs in your world. It's like vocabulary, it's like the type of gravity, it's the type of plants. Like if you have a universe, you have those things. Your art is, and all the parts of your artwork are part of this universe. So you can kind of break it down into there's themes or concepts in your work that tie itself together. Maybe it is about how you use materials or medium. Like if you're not someone who's making representational artwork and it's all abstract, it might be about your investigation of the materials and medium that is your universe. It could be about what you are saying in your work. So a lot of work right now is socially engaging or promoting discussion about what is happening to the world around us, and hoping that it creates dialogue and people to react. And so maybe your work is based on that. Here is an example of a great artist who has this kind of like diverse body of work. So Kiki Smith, her work incorporates the human body as well as nature, about the feminine body. And, because her work is about the feminine experience, it's not just like, oh, I'm a woman and this is what it feels like, but it's like, I am a woman and this is what it feels like, and you have to respond to that. So her work is really powerful. And in her universe, she doesn't just do printmaking or just sculpture. She does a range of many things. So I incorporated into this slide all of the different types of ways that she makes work. So it might be a drawing, it might be printmaking, it might be a painting, it might be sculptures or installations, which take up entire spaces. So she's very versatile with the materials that she uses. But in the images that I selected, you can see that her use of imagery, you know that they belong together, right? They are part of the same universe. Whereas someone else's imagery, another artist's imagery you could tell, oh, it's not part of this universe. So I'm gonna move on. Any questions? Okay. Sorry. I'm gonna stop my share for 2 seconds because I just clicked on something and closed out I'm sorry. Closed out my tab.
And Youngji, you did say that you were going to be sharing the slides afterwards, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oops. Oh my goodness. Nope, this is not the one. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry I did this. I can't believe. Okay, sorry. So talked about Kiki Smith. I don't know where you guys are in your arts careers, but I wanted to just say this quickly and to just touch base. Like, I know that I am always looking around my peers' work. I'm looking at galleries. I'm looking at different ways that people are making work, especially if they're using similar materials to me or similar imagery or similar concepts, because I don't want to be I want to be making original and unique work. And I don't want to be like making something that is very similar to somebody else, especially because then people can get offended or like, oh my God, you're plagiarizing my work. And even if it's not specifically plagiarizing, like you want, art and art history and the world of making art is such a rich, big tapestry since like before writing. It's just huge, right? As soon as people were drawing on cave walls, we have been making art when we've been expressing ourselves. So it's diverse and it's rich and it's got many textures, and you want to make sure that your little thread in that tapestry is also unique and special and not lost. So I just put this slide in here as like a kind of, look around, know who like who the people around you and what other works people are working on. Okay, so you made your portfolio, you have your work, we're building our work, and in my studio I am building work constantly. Now we have to do the photographing. Okay, so when you are photographing your artwork, in my studio I don't have like special photography lights. I don't even have a special camera. I use my iPhone. And, I think iPhones these days are pretty great. So unless you have access to a photographer or you yourself are a photographer who can do this, I often find that this is the best way for me when I am photographing my work. Make sure that the wall behind you is a clean white, gray, or neutral black background, like black background. Make sure that there is even lighting, no gradients. And if you don't have like camera lights or good lighting, and no matter where you hang your work, it's always creating like this kind of top right, and then it gets darker as it goes down because it's going away from the light. What I tend to do is I just lay my work flat on the floor, and then I photograph it top down so that it's much more even light. You just avoid the shadows, make sure that the edges of the work are parallel to the edge of the camera frame. Okay, so it's not like a trapezoid shape. And this is one thing that I think a lot of people make mistakes on, but always show the edges of your work and do not crop them. You don't want to show like a big giant wall in the blank wall in the back, but it does help when people are looking at your work to see the edges. So I put this artwork here as an example, and if you see it, along the edges, you can see like, oh, it's not a straight line. There's something coming off the edges, and it gives curators or people who are looking at your work a chance to kind of understand, oh, it's not just paint. It might be something textural or three-dimensional, and it gives them a better sense of what they're looking at. Similarly, if you're doing 3D work, definitely take more than 3, but if you are submitting work, maybe you want to show, some different views and have some options. So I say if you can, at least, try to have whole images from several different angles and some close-up detail shots, again, on a clean background. Have good lighting that shows like contrast of the textures and the forms of your sculpture. Okay. So a lot of building a visual arts portfolio is about what happens when you're done making the work, like photographing, and then finally it's like, what do I do with all of those images? So you need to be super organized. So what I do with all my images is when I'm done photographing, I make sure that I label them properly so that when I'm looking for them, it is easy to find, first of all. And then I know like what the title is, I know what the size is. So if you can, do this for each photo, great. But if not, at least know that this is the format that you will be using when you're applying for shows. So your first name _ last name _ title _ year _ size _ medium. So like most proposals that you will be applying when you're applying for shows or residencies or grants are going to kind of ask for the labels on your images to be in some formula of this, okay? And make sure that when you are labeling the size of your work, it's height and then length in inches. Be very specific about your units. If it's 3-dimensional, it's height, the length, and then the depth, how deep it goes towards the wall. When you are taking your photos on your phone, and I do this sometimes, and I'm like, I want to punch myself every time because I find that my images are high efficiency and not JPEGs. That is a big no-no, because what that means is that it's high efficiency for your phone storage, meaning that the actual images are like stamp size. They're tiny. So on your iPhones, you especially want to make sure that you go to your settings, you go to your cameras, you go to formats, and you select most compatible. That means that, you're telling the camera to look for the most detail in your artwork, which is the most important. I put in a little tutorial here. It's pretty easy, but if you want to, you can watch that later. It's like 2 minutes. So please do that. I've taken sometimes 100 pictures of artwork, moving around, lights and blah, blah, blah. And then I go back to my phone and it's all high efficiency. Like I can't use that to apply for anything. So please make sure you check for that before you take your photos. Okay, so after you have your photos, depending on the forum or the website that you are applying for these art shows or residencies, they will, because it's online, they will ask you to resize your photos. Like if it's too big, it won't open on their servers. So I use Photoshop. It's a great resource to help resize. But if you are not Photoshop proficient, you can use some other apps. I've listed them here for you. I don't know them very well, but you know, I think that you can just kind of check to see which one you become most comfortable with.
Can I just ask a quick thing about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Photoshop wise, I don't use that, but I know it's important. Is it, you used to like pay for it like every month? Is that the way?
Yeah, I think it is pay for every month. I think there's I used to pay I think it was like $10 a month for like just the Photoshop. Yeah, I think it used to be like $10 a month. I'm not sure if it's changed. I have like a teacher account, so
I see.
I don't know what I'm paying for that. It's through
Right.
my school, but I don't know if it's too much, but also like $10 a month on top of everything else, part of living in New York could be a lot. So there's definitely other resources here, especially if you're just trying to resize things. It
Yeah.
might be, you might not need all of Photoshop.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. So you have all your photos. Great. They're labeled. The other part of it is when I take photos of my work, I take like a bunch of them at a time, because then I can go back and pick and choose. Oh, this one is cropped well. Oh no, this is crooked. Oh, this has better lighting. This angle is better to show my sculptural work. So I, take a lot of photos. And what I have a problem with is if I don't organize them pretty quickly, like they just get lost in my phone, and just like, I'm like, oh no, I took those photos. Where did they go? So there are two things that I do. One is I'm going to talk about organizing your images in the lighter pink box. Oops. I put all my images into my Google Drive. So you might have a hard drive at home. I put everything into my Google Drive. And in my Google Drive, I definitely make sure that I organize it into specific folders. And each folder, so if you look at this photo, that like the screenshot I have, I took a screenshot of my Google Drive, and I have a big folder called Yunji's artwork. And in that folder, I have a subfolder called paintings, because I have sculptures, I have installations, I have photographs. So I have a lot of other types of work. So I have a subfolder called paintings. And in that folder, I have many, many smaller folders. And each of these smaller folders are all of the photos I have of one painting each. So if you look at this top line that's highlighted in blue, it's called In Another Universe, You Are Being Born. And you can see that I've labeled the title of it, not only the title, but the year I made it, the size I made it, because I find that it's easier when I'm applying to shows to have this information kind of like readily available, so that I'm not like looking for it everywhere. So any questions? Okay, so yeah, so I have all of these folders. So I try to be super organized, because that's the best way to, so that it's when I need to use them or access them, like I know where to find them. The other thing is,
Can't hear you now.
sorry, and have all of it labeled on the folder title. Okay. Did you guys hear me talk about the checklist?
No.
Okay, so that's where I cut off.
Starting to talk about the checklist.
Okay, so besides having my images in my Google Drive, I also create a document for each body of work called the checklist. Some places will be like, oh, it's your image list. It doesn't matter. They all mean the same thing. A checklist is basically a document that lists the artwork, the title, the year, the medium, the size, sometimes the price that you're selling it for. And so I also have a checklist. So this image here with the TV on it, little photograph, it's a new body of work that I'm making. So I have many sculptures in that body of work. And in that body of work, once I'm done with one piece, I photograph it, I put it in my Google Drive, wonderful. Then I take one of its images and I add it to the document and I put all my checklist information. I also put a tiny artist statement for each piece so that it, records my thoughts, as well as if I need to write about it in a future artist statement with another, few pieces, I know where I can take my information from and some of the wordage that I would like to use. So I keep track of, oh yeah, in this body of work, I have this and this and this pieces that I can choose from. Okay, so yes, questions?
Unless somebody else is going.
Yeah.
I mean, this is gonna sound really that I haven't done this stuff in a while, but this seems like a simple job document to create with those boxes. You did that in Google?
Yeah, and when we're done when I go through my slides, I can share how to create this document and a table like that. I can show you how to do that. Yeah,
Excellent.
like,
Thank you.
just remind me. Don't let me go before I
All
teach
right,
how to
cool,
do it.
cool, great, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So you made your artwork, you built your universe, you photographed it, you organized it, and now the final part of your artist statement is of your portfolio. Remember, is the writing part. So what is the writing part? It is the artist statement. And an artist statement is a piece of writing by you that helps the audience access or understand your artistic work. So, everyone who's going to be looking at your work or selecting your work may not be an artist themselves. So specifically, like if a curator is selecting artworks, they might not be like a visual arts person, or they might not be familiar with like your type of work. So you want to have that statement written in first person that represents you and kind of explains what you're trying to get at, so that they're like, oh, you know what? At first, looking at it, I didn't think that it fit into the theme of our show, but now having read this, I understand it. And I know that there's like a kind of, some people are like, oh, the art should speak for itself. But nowadays, the way that we make art and why we make art is so diverse that sometimes, it's got to be more than meets the eye, and you need that writing as part of it. So not only will it help you explain your inspirations and your concept, but you will need to use it to apply for exhibitions. They will always ask you for an artist statement, most often. And surprisingly, when I write an artist statement, I come back to it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was feeling it when I was making my work, but I didn't realize like how valid it is or how many new ideas I'm getting from just having written about it. So it's a great way to help you with your creative process and also practice for your own, like I want to speak about it at an artist talk or people are visiting my studio. Now you have that vocabulary to talk about your work. Here's another great thing that I learned very recently. I was applying for a show with another person, and she was like, I was like, oh, I'm going to write my hope for this work is. And she said, no, don't use my hope is. You use intentional statements and you say this piece is about, and you tell them because it's your own artwork. And that will actually convince people to be convinced and be like, oh, okay, that is what the work is about. So, please do that. Okay. So how do you even start writing an artist statement? You're like, I don't know. Okay. So let's break it down into 4 parts. First, reflect on your artistic journey. Okay. So you begin by thinking about, your themes, your ideas, the emotions, your influences and experiences and your background, all of these different things that like make you the artist that you are, right? And you're like, this is why I make artwork. Another part of your brainstorm is identify your purpose. Think about why you create the artwork, and what you hope to communicate or achieve through your work. Okay, so it's kind of like I just said the same things. It sounds the same, but your artistic journey is about kind of like your person, and then your identity for your artwork is kind of about the artwork. Sorry. Okay. Another part is define your style and your techniques. So think about like the artistic style and the techniques and processes. So you want to brainstorm about that, like discuss the mediums and the materials that you use, the methods, the different approaches that you have, and try to write about why it is unique. Remember that rich art tapestry, like you want to think about why it is unique in that. And another part that you can brainstorm on is, who are you showing this artwork to? Especially artist statements, like if I'm applying for a gallery somewhere, or a residency, I want to say in that artist statement, like, I think this residency will be perfect for me because, blah, blah, blah. You want to be specific. You want your statement to resonate with the audience, without lying, without like, making up something totally bogus. You want to be genuine, but you also want them to be, like, oh, this person really does belong with us. So yeah, art collectors, galleries, critics, and the general public. And then once you have your brainstorm, you write. So you write in your voice. Use your unique voice and perspective to convey your thoughts and feelings authentically. I think like I fall into this all the time too. Like I try to write like in these big words because I'm like, oh, I'm being so thoughtful about it. But sometimes you don't need it. You can be totally genuine and totally deep with your thoughts without all the jargon and without all of the technical words, because maybe the person reading it is going to be like, what am I don't need to read a thesis on this. I just want to know what your work is about. Keep it concise and clear. Make sure that you're checking for grammar, you're editing. Don't be repetitive, and make sure that you edit and revise. I think a lot of times, like we write that initial draft, it's always best to ask others to read it, but also like read it aloud in front of a mirror to yourself, because you find a lot of mistakes, but you also find like, oh, that's not interesting and I need to revise that. So include personal insights and be very personal and specific and again, genuine. Like people resonate with that. Write about your inspirations, and write about like why your work has a connection to different things, maybe to the organization that you're applying to. Write about all of these different personal insights.
Do
yes.
those oh, you have an example here. No, that's fine. I was just going to ask about how long one that I wrote recently, was I had to for like an application, was like 200 words or so, like that. It shouldn't be too long, right?
Yeah. I think 200 is pretty good.
Yeah.
So like this is my artist statement.
Right.
So it's 2 paragraphs. And this is just one version of an artist statement for this body of work. Depending on where I'm writing for, they might be like, oh, it has to be, through between 300 to 600 words, then this is not long enough. So I would definitely want to use that opportunity to talk more in depth about the work. But like, I think if they're not giving you too much instruction, as long as it's clear, as long as it's not repetitive, I think that's the most important part.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm gonna just read this because, like, imagine this wall with all of these sculptures without having read the artist statement, right? We have our initial thoughts. I know that my picture here doesn't show these pieces in detail, but they're cardboard houses. They're kind of like bird houses, kind of like doll houses, or even shrines. Sometimes you will find small picture frames in it, black and white picture frames. They're all in the shape of houses. Dilapidated. They're made from cardboard and also found plant material. So now that we have a description, I'm going to kind of read my artist statement, and then you can see how it adds to, or I'm trying to add to, what this work looks like. I delve into personal fears and anxieties, drawing inspiration from the static and electricity that surrounds me. My work resonates with current discussions on environmental distress, as well as themes of immigration, the concept of home, and physiology and psychology, and objects as portals of memory/time travel and intention/misconceptions. After having immigrated to New York in the early 80s, keep everything has been their mantra of survival and shelter. Now, in the eve of their lives, my parents are reverting back into a mode of foraging, collecting, and hiding away resources for an unknowable future as they fall back into their core memories of the aftermath of the Korean War. Our house is a cramped collection of secondhand furniture, moldy clothing from church bins, and my mother diligently stores away expired cans for use after the rapture. So I'm, in this statement, I haven't really talked about, how I made this work, like what materials. So if I had more space or more, word space, I would definitely go back into it. In this, I am kind of pointing to that by talking about the environmental aspects of it. And, you're like, oh, you look at the work and you're like, oh, this work is then about this kind of like washing away and dilapidation of these structures. But it also talks about my culture, my background, and kind of like my own personal fears that I know other people also resonate with. So it's personal, but I'm also trying to make a connection to people outside of myself as well. So hopefully that helped. And helped to like add to the work. Okay. Another type of writing that you may need to do is an artist bio or an autobiography. Like, not a giant book, obviously, but like a bio about yourself. So, they're going to add, you should write about who you are as an artist, what sets your artwork apart. It should be engaging, authentic, and reflective of your artistic identity and vision. Again, keep it concise and clear. So an artist statement is kind of different from an artist bio. I didn't put my artist bio in there, but I'm going to tell you what an artist bio includes. It's a lot more formulaic than the artist statement is. So you want to keep it concise. Okay, use clear professional language. You don't need to have a lot of like descriptive imagery for this. What to include in your artist bio, usually it's like a paragraph or two long, or two. You want to have your full name and your artistic identity, kind of like, oh, I'm a sculptor, or I'm a photographer, or I make installations about blah, blah, blah. Talk about your background and your education. So people are looking to see your cultural backgrounds, your social identities, all of those kind of things are part of what make people resonate with you. So include as much as you're comfortable with. Write down any milestones or major exhibitions or anything that you're like, this was really important to me as an artist. I've been making artwork for this many years and this is what it's about. Talk about your artistic styles, the mediums, the techniques, your influences, your themes, concepts, anything that is very specific to you, write about it. And also try to make a connection to like, you know, I write about environmental distress, right? I'm personally interested and invested in it. But like, I know that other people are also looking at a lot of work all the time about environmental, you know, awareness. So I make a point to mention that. Write down any exhibitions that you had, any achievements, any collections that you are a part of. So it's kind of like a resume about yourself written in paragraph form. It's a little bit more narrative. You can find many, many great examples on artist websites. There's, you know, every website, every artist has like an artist bio about me. So you can go and read some of those there. And finally, the final piece of writing that you should be aware of is that artist resume or a CV. And I have like my teaching resume, which looks different. Sometimes the information might be the same, but it looks very different from my artist CV because my artist CV is a document that kind of like outlines really carefully all of my professional experience as an artist. And sometimes teaching is part of it. So like teaching this class is part of my arts career. So I would include this, but I might not write that. I'm like, you know, I would write it, but I wouldn't make a big deal out of it in my artist CV. Like I'm a public school teacher. I would mention it, but I wouldn't make like a big, oh, in my teaching, I do this and this and this. So I focus on my art career and my exhibition history in my artist CV. Again, depending on what you're applying for, you will need an artist CV and they're going to ask for it. So what to include? Again, this is much more formulaic. Before I read this, what to include list, if you look at the bottom right corner, formatting, you know, I think sometimes like people use like really crazy looking fonts because they're like, oh, I want to make it stand out, but don't do that. You just need to be super, super, you know, clear about who you are and what you did, because nobody wants to have like a hard time deciphering like font and writing. Don't go anything smaller than font size 10. Artist CVs tend to get like many pages long, so it's okay. They expect it to be many pages long. It could be like 12-point font, and organize it either chronologically or by category. So like, oh, out of undergrad, I did this show, and through grad school and blah, blah, blah. It could go, you know, up to the current present time. Or you can break it down into like, oh, this is my exhibition history in, you know, my installation work. This is my exhibition history like this. My CV is kind of broken down into both. I have a section for solo shows. I have a section for group shows. I have a section for online exhibitions or print exhibitions. So I have a section for different things. And in each section, I order everything chronologically. So from, you know, kind of like the beginning of my career to now. So, you know, I do both. I think both is fine. What to include? Okay, so at the top, very clearly, who are you? Like, why, you know, how do they know that you are the person that you are? So your full name, your contact information, like your email, and you could sometimes put your phone number and your home address or whatever address, you know, whatever way it is that you want people to be able to reach you in case they express interest, your website, any social media handles that you have. And then right below it is your artist intention statement. This is literally not a whole paragraph. Don't copy and paste your whole artist statement. It's like one, maybe at max 2 sentences that is kind of like, oh, I'm a mixed media artist and I focus on, environmental distress. It could be like that, just so that they know, like, oh, this is the kind of work that they do. This is the kind of work that they are showing here in this list. So after that, your solo exhibitions. And in your solo exhibitions, you would write the title of the exhibition, where did you show it, what's the date, and any other information that's important. For example, like who curated it. If it's a solo exhibition, sometimes like who curated it is pretty important. And then below that, I list my group exhibitions. And that would be, again, title, where was it, where was the gallery, what's the dates. And this is the part where it tends to get many, many pages long, because we oftentimes do lots of little group shows throughout the year. And some places have a bigger kind of like name value than other places. So I kind of pick and choose depending on where I'm applying. If they're like, oh, your resume or your CV can only be 1 page long, then I have a special CV version that is only 1 page, where I kind of pick and choose which ones I'm going to share with them. And I say selected group exhibitions. I have another section for residencies and any fellowships that you are part of. Another section for any publications or articles, journals, online shows, any of that stuff I kind of put in a different section. If you are part of a notable collection, you should mention that, because that's pretty cool. Any awards, grants, scholarships, or honors, any organizations, collectives that you are a part of. And then, this is because this is about my art experience, my professional experience, I put at the end. So like my teaching positions, any art talks, any workshops, anything that is related to my art career, but not specifically about my artwork. Any exhibition catalogs and press, make sure that if it's like an article that was online, you include the link so that people know where to find it. Your education. And finally, this is optional, but it's always good to have like a list of 1 to 2 professional references. So a peer artist or someone who can speak for you as an artist. So that when you're applying, people can be like, oh, let me reach out to that person and see. You don't want to be, like, you want to make sure that you are upfront and say, I am responsible artist. When I promise to bring this kind of work in, I promise, and here's who can vouch for me. Okay. Sharing your portfolio. Okay, so you have all of your visual arts portfolio now. Here's a little bonus that I put on here. Okay, you have all of your things. What do I do with it? How do I get my art out there and, make sure that I'm doing something with it? I tell my students all the time, because this is what they think. They don't want to write. They just want to be making artwork. They don't even want to photograph. They don't even want to do a critique. They don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, guys, you're not in a cave where you're just like making your artwork and then someone's going to knock on your door and be like, hey, I heard you're making artwork in there. Can we see it? You want to show it at our gallery? Because it's not going to happen like that. You have to go out there and really like just knock on doors. So 1, get your website ready, or at least an online portfolio. So I put together a short list of different places. Most of them are free. I don't think Squarespace is free. I'm sorry?
Wix is not free. I'm sorry, there's an echo here, so it's weird to talk. But Wix I pay for, and I did it a long time ago, and I find the way that I set it up complicated, and it's like, I don't know, like $30 a month or something like that. So I can easily, from what you're saying here, like pick something else.
Yeah. it looks like, so I use Wix too. So I just put Wix in there and I put 2 stars because I think that there is a free version, but that may be so basic. But I know that, you know, like these other, like Behance has beautiful spaces and it looks like it's free. So we don't always have to be paying for online presentation of our work. So I would definitely look into some of these other, you know,
Uh-huh.
web sites so that you're not like shelling out money and you're like, ah, I hate my website. Because sometimes I hate my website and I'm like, should I be paying for this? But you know, but yeah, as long as you have somewhere an online presence so that people can be like, oh, let me go check out more of their work. I'm really interested. Here's where I can find everything. And I did kind of like search up some of you guys that I saw on the list prior to this meeting, and I did see that a lot of you did also have some websites. So great. And if you don't, here are some resources, some ways to do it. Okay, once you have your website, you can now also apply for art shows and exhibitions. And how do you do that? You can apply through open calls, and I'm going to go more in depth about open calls in the next slide. You can also find open calls for artwork through social media platforms. So like on Instagram, if you follow a gallery, you might see that, oh, I just saw a posting, there's an open call and they're looking for this kind of work and it's going to be perfect for me. So definitely apply there, but also have that social media presence like Instagram. I think is pretty easy, a great way to kind of update your online presence easily, more easily than doing it on a website. You just post an image, you use hashtags, make sure that you're like, oh, this is me, this is what I'm working on, so that people are finding you and people see your work and it's out there. And you never know like who's going to show up and be like, hey, I saw this and I think it's pretty cool. Apply to residencies and grants. So if you've been like, what is she saying? What is a residency? A residency is like going back to school for a tiny short break. I mean, some of them can be for like a week and some of them can be for like a year. It could be local, it could be overseas. It really depends, but it's a really great way to kind of take a break from life and engage with other creatives in a studio setting. So, you know, you get to meet other people, you get to use their facilities, you get to you know, get mentoring from people who are going to help you with your creative process and maybe even exhibitions. Some residencies are free, some are paid. So, you know, there's a lot out there and you just got to keep applying for them and seeing, you know, what fits best in your life. And grants, like Dion was saying earlier, grants are great ways to get funding for your work and support for your creative ideas. Okay, so how to find an open call for an opportunity. So an open call is when an art opportunity just, you know, kind of like literally, hey, we're looking for this kind of artist to show, or this kind of artist for this residency, or whatever it is. So here are some different resources for where you can find them. These green underlines are all hyperlinks. So if you just click on it, it will take you to the site where it will list all of those different art opportunities. Some of them are going to be free. Some of them you're going to have to pay for. You know, I try not to really apply for anything that's like over $40 because after a while it really adds up. And you know, if you apply to 10 shows and it was $40 each, that's $400. And then, you know, maybe you'll get into one. So it's you want to look around. There might be redundancies in this list.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, but you know, I'm sorry.
No, my phone rang, so I put it on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so look through this list. There's a lot of different things on there. You know, I would say that if there's things called collectives in which a group of artists join together to constantly have shows, and you're paying into this pot together to kind of like produce your own exhibitions. That's a collective. But I also say stay away from different opportunities. Like you apply for a show and they're like, oh, but then you have to pay like $500 to get into the show and blah, blah, blah. Like I think that's not the best opportunity. There's other opportunities out there. So try not to like pay to have other people look at your artwork. That's not really a great deal. And that's separate or different from like, paying the administrative fee for an open call. That's like you're paying for the person to take their time to kind of like look through your work. Otherwise, like they wouldn't be able to have open calls and, hire someone to do that. Okay. So this is a short list of different resources that we have. On top of these green hyperlinks, which are all collections of open calls, many local and national arts councils all over have different open calls. So for example, BCA, they might have different open calls. So depending on where you live, there will be different resources for you. Again, follow your social media. On social media, follow your galleries and know, what's going on with them there. You can also do a Google search for open calls for art. Sometimes like great things pop up. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna have a little sip of tea. Let's say you found a great opportunity and you're like, this is perfect for me. I'm gonna try this. What you will need to do is check the prospectus. A prospectus is kind of either like a document or it's just like laid out on the online site, because you're applying for these online. And it's basically a comprehensive guide to everything that you will need to submit to the show, but also kind of like what the deadlines are, eligibility, like some shows are only for, people under 40 or whatever. I don't know why, but, depending on what they're trying to help to do in that exhibition, there's a lot of different criteria. So you might want to look at that. It will give you deadlines, exhibition and residency details, judging criteria. It will give you the submission guidelines, meaning like, this is a theme that we're looking for. And then if you're like, oh man, I'm a painter and this is a photography show, then don't apply there. Don't do that to yourself. Make so you read over everything in the prospectus. They want 10 pieces of artwork that is part of this theme. Do I have 10 pieces? Do I have 10 good, strong pieces? So your artist statement, your bio, CVs, sometimes they're not going to ask for all of these things, like your references, but sometimes they might. So it's always good to read over and then have it ready. And once you have your number of pieces, then pertaining to this prospectus or this open call, you will compile a brand new checklist. So you're going to pick and choose which pieces that you are going to be submitting for this show. And that checklist is also your record to remember, like, I got an email back today from this gallery that I applied to. Like it was over like 2 months ago. And then they were like, congratulations, we selected this piece. And then I didn't remember what piece that I submitted, which is terrible. So I had to do a lot of kind of like diving into my email and blah, blah, blah. So this is one example. A checklist would have been really helpful. I would know, oh, this is the piece that they're talking about. So have that checklist, be organized. When you are ready to share, share it on your social media. You can also, okay, whoa, sorry. It looks like I repeated some things on this slide. I'll clean it up before I share it with all of you guys. But the most important part is check the prospectus and compile that checklist. Okay. Moving on. And I think this is, okay, my second to last slide. Sorry, we're getting close to it, but these are going to be fast. I think a question that a lot of people always have is like, how do I price my work? Like, this is my baby and I love it. And it's so hard for me to part with it. Like, am I going to charge like, $10,000 for this? Or some artists, what they do is they undersell themselves. And I'm like, oh no, like you put in so much work and that was so expensive and you only sold it for $50. What are you thinking? So it really depends. And there's no real formula for figuring this out. You should know your value, right? And set a base price. And I'll talk about that base price in a little bit, but kind of research the market and see like, oh, this person is very similar. This is what they're pricing it at, but they're also living in like, Idaho or somewhere, and the art market prices are different. Or this gallery, the commission is 50%. Oh my God. Then if I want to make $200 off of this piece, I have to sell it at $400. So you have to check those things. Be confident, be professional. Also, when you're negotiating prices, be transparent. Like, it took me 3 months to work on this, and I worked like 5 hours a day, and the cost of it was super expensive. And I know it doesn't look like much, but this is what it went into it. Because those people buying the artwork a lot of times are not artists, and they're not going to understand all of that process. Make sure that you understand from your buyer's perspective, like, oh, the clientele here are paying a lot of money, or, oh, this is a really small kind of like homegrown gallery. I'm not going to sell something for like thousands of dollars here. So make sure that you know where you're selling it to. And finally, when you do sell it, keep a record of your clients. Who did you sell what to? Document any agreements, or kind of like, oh, I sold this at this price, and have an invoice or a certificate of authentication. I think that's how you say it. Basically saying like, I made this work and I'm selling it to this person for this much, and there's no other pieces like it. And build your relationships with your previous clients, because they might want to come back and buy work from you later. Okay, so this is ultimately what you consider when you set a base price. Like, at one point, are you unwilling to part with the work? Like, you're just looking at it and you're like, I cannot go less than whatever for this. And my heart would just break, and there would just be no point. Like, I cannot. That's what your base price is. Okay. And then finally, continue to grow your studio practice. So after you've made your artwork, you've made your portfolio, you've applied to your shows, don't go back and shut that cave door again. You have to continue to be part of that arts community out there. So do studio visits. Go connect with other artists out there in your community or even further away. Go see the work, go see the space, and make sure you ask the person about creative processes that is specific to that artist, because you might learn something from it. You can also do your own studio, open studios, meaning that you open your doors and you invite others to come into your space. And this is where you would kind of like, have your talk that you practiced writing about in your artist statements, and you get to share and practice, and also get like brand new ideas from other people. And I have had many art opportunities come my way through an open studios events where, different kind of curators were like walking by, and they were like, they might not be like, oh, let's do a show right away. But like months later, they might be like, I stopped by your studio and I think this is a really great opportunity for you. So you never know who you're speaking to. So do open studios. Make sure not everyone can pay for an extra studio space, but make sure you have a dedicated space and time to make work. It's a labor of love. And it's kind of, I say this to my younger students all the time. I'm like, being an artist is like being in love, or, before you get married and then you hate each other. It's like when you're first dating, you make all the time in the world, no matter how tired you are, no matter how whatever, you make time for that other person. And this is kind of like that. When you're making artwork and you are an artist, you need to make that space and time for it. And finally, go visit the galleries and see art, know your market, know what's out there. And I think like, hopefully, you know, you go back and you reflect and you're like, okay, I see that that work is trendy right now. I see that that work is important right now. I think that people are talking about this work and I think I can make a connection with it. So seeing, what's out there is super important. And I think, yep, that's it. I will definitely share this portfolio with you. I will definitely share this with you. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. But we have like 13 minutes. Does anybody have any other questions?
I don't want to. Did anyone else raise their hands? Because I feel like I've talked too much a little bit.
No, join in.
Okay.
Great.
So cool. The thing that I wanted to ask about was, a lot of the CV thing and all of that. I don't know if you're sort of, I mean, I'm not new, but it's the last, 6 or 8 years, and I've had, community shows and a show at a small community gallery in Yonkers and stuff like that. And so, I mean, where do you seek your next thing? Like, I hear of things and I can apply to those. But like, at what point do you ever like go to a gallery on the Lower East Side or something like that and, approach folks, or do you not? And I haven't really gotten good answers about that before. There's no clear thing about what to actually do when you approach like a, important.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think you're asking really, kind of like raw, heartfelt question about being an artist and the difficulties of it. And I definitely go through periods of like art ennui, like all the time. I'm like, oh, nobody wants me, and I'm doing all this work, and I've just applied, and I just got rejected from everything, and blah blah blah. I definitely go through periods of that, and like I have seen open calls for like emerging artists, and I'm like, I'm emerging. I'm still emerging. I'm still in my cocoon, and I'm trying to like rip out of there and get seen. And but then they're like, oh, but if you've been practicing for more than 10 years, you don't count. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm just like a slow grower or whatever it is. And I think back in like the, heyday of New York art scene, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even like the 90s, you could go walk into a gallery and be like, hey, this is my artwork. I think that was acceptable and doable, especially because they didn't have social media at the time. But now you will get frowned at and kind of like, who are you? And like kind of tossed out, especially because New York is filled with artists. So I would say don't do that. Unless like you have like a very, very large connection, like a sizable connection to a curator at a gallery or someone in that gallery. I think like approaching them and being like, hey, show my work is going to be difficult to do. But
would you write them? I mean, would you send them stuff or no?
I say stick to the open calls, but also like do a lot of social media. My work, and engage in those open studio events where it's not you're approaching other people, but people are approaching you, and make yourself accessible. And I think like that is, the most realistic way to do it. It's still hard, but it's more doable than, kind of getting like visually like kicked out the door.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying though, because it is hard. It's really hard. but you just got to keep at it. And like even the community shows, all of those things, like they add up and they are part of your arts resume. So don't be defeated. And,
Right.
you know, like you never know who's looking and who's seeing.
Mhm.
Yeah, you never know.
Yep.
So I still do my local, you know, Sunny's Bar exhibitions all the
Cool.
time. And I love it, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Cool.
good. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And do you do shows like you know, I mean, I've been offered space at a nearby place, like, but they don't take any role in like, I mean, they're not the curators. They like,
Yeah.
you have the space, you can put up whatever you want. That's still an important thing as long as you're not paying for it, right? Like as long as
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say a lot of times, yes, going to, you know, having a big show in Chelsea would be awesome. Who doesn't dream of that? But like I say, like sometimes having those small community spaces or donated or shared spaces for a pop-up show or like a self-produced show is also a blessing. Most places aren't going to be like picking up your artwork or paying for you to show your work there anyway. So having the space where you are the person who is in charge of like where things go and blah 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 is pretty great also. You
Mhm.
know, especially if you're not paying for it and maybe you're gonna buy in for a few postcards. I think those are great. And that if you're only showing your own work, that is a solo show,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think those are great opportunities.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? I also know that Dion put a survey for the survey in the chat. So please do let us know how we're doing. I think that would benefit for like any other programming. Yeah. Dion, what do you think?
Sounds good to me. Hold on, let me stop recording.